I never imagined that my own son, the one I'd rocked in my arms through feverish nights, would one day stand before a judge and accuse me of being insane just to seize control of my finances. I had spent my entire life saving every penny to secure our future, but I failed to realize that the real danger wasn't losing money, but giving too much of it to the ones I loved. When I finally found the strength to defend my life savings, I never thought it would cost me a son, but it would lead me to a new love at the age of 72. But before I continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and drop a comment below. Where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. Looking back at 70 is like flipping through a photo album with pages worn by time. Some images remain sharp and vibrant, others have faded, leaving only the faint outlines of what they once were. My name is Eleanor, and for 42 years I was a high school math teacher in a public school in Charlotte. My husband David passed away when our only son, Ethan, was just 13, a brain aneurysm, sudden, devastating, final. Overnight, I became the sole provider, the only compass for our son. The years that followed were defined by strict discipline, not just for Ethan, but mainly for me. I learned to live on less to save more. I turned down dinner invitations, gave up the habit of buying new clothes, and took on extra tutoring classes on Saturdays. It was all to ensure that Ethan had access to the best education possible, that he would never feel his father's absence reflected in material hardship. Our two-bedroom condo, which David and I had bought when I found out I was pregnant, became our sanctuary. Small but cozy, with a balcony where I cultivated a garden of African violets, David's favorite flowers. Ethan grew up just as I had hoped, studious, disciplined, respectful. He graduated with a degree in civil engineering from a state university and landed a job at a reputable construction firm right after graduation. At 28, he already had his own apartment, for which I contributed half of the down payment without a second thought. Seeing my son established and independent was the fulfillment of the dream David and I had once shared. When I retired at 65, I had a comfortable nest egg, about $250,000, the result of 4 decades of quiet sacrifices. It wasn't a fortune, but it represented security for my golden years, as I like to call this phase, enough to live modestly, cover potential medical expenses, and maybe pursue a few postponed dreams, like seeing the Grand Canyon. It was around that time that Ethan met Chloe. He brought her over for Sunday dinner, a tradition we religiously maintained. She walked into my apartment like someone evaluating a property for sale, her sharp eyes cataloging every detail, from the lace curtains I had sewn myself to the picture frames on the shelf. Blonde hair, impeccably straight, long red nails, high heels even for a casual lunch. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Vance, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Ethan talks so much about you," she said, extending a hand with a surprisingly firm grip. I had made pot roast, Ethan's favorite, and throughout the meal, Chloe praised everything effusively. The food, the apartment, even my porcelain dinnerware set that I had inherited from my mother. Ethan watched her with an expression I recognized immediately. Blind admiration, the kind of gaze that sees nothing beyond the surface. "Chloe works at a boutique in South Park Mall," Ethan commented proudly. "Mom, she knows all the trends." "How interesting," I replied, serving him more rice. "Do you enjoy your work?" "I love fashion," she said, adjusting her hair, "but it's just temporary. I'm planning to open my own business soon." "What kind of business?" "An exclusive boutique with imported clothing," she answered promptly. "There's a growing market for it in Charlotte. Women are tired of the same options at department stores." Ethan nodded enthusiastically, as if he had already heard this detailed plan countless times. I realized in that moment that my son, so meticulous in professional matters, seemed to have suspended all critical judgment when it came to Chloe. The Sunday gatherings continued, and little by little, Chloe became a part of the routine. She always arrived with small gifts, a cake from an expensive bakery, exotic flowers that must have cost 3 times as much as my violets, a silk scarf that perfectly matched my eyes, calculated gestures that Ethan interpreted as demonstrations of genuine affection. The wedding came 6 months later, a ceremony at a garden venue that cost a third of my savings. Ethan insisted on splitting the expenses with me, claiming that mother and son should share this special moment. I, who had dreamed of this day since I held Ethan in my arms, agreed without hesitation. I wanted to see him happy, fulfilled, on his way. The first request for financial help came 2 months after the wedding. A Sunday like any other, except Ethan arrived alone, explaining that Chloe had a migraine. "Mom," he began, as we sat on the balcony with my violets drinking coffee. "We're thinking of remodeling the kitchen in our apartment. Nothing too extravagant, just replacing the cabinets and appliances." "That's wonderful, son. A new kitchen for your new life." "Yeah," he continued, avoiding my gaze. "It's just that something unexpected came up at work. A project got postponed, and so did my bonus." I immediately knew where this conversation was headed. "Do you need a loan?" I asked directly. "It's not exactly a loan, Mom. It's more like a little help. $10,000. I'll pay you back as soon as the bonus comes through, I promise. $10,000. Almost a tenth of my remaining savings for a kitchen renovation that was in perfect condition. I had visited their apartment the week before and hadn't noticed anything that warranted an urgent remodel. "Of course, son. I'll transfer it to you tomorrow." Ethan smiled with relief, as if he had carried a huge weight all the way there and could finally set it down. We talked about other things, but I noticed he was more relaxed, as if the true purpose of his visit had been fulfilled. The money was transferred, the bonus was never mentioned again, and the supposed kitchen renovation turned into a ski trip to Aspen. I found out weeks later when Chloe posted photos on social media, showing off new ski gear against a snowy backdrop. That was just the beginning. The requests became regular, always accompanied by elaborate justifications and promises of repayment that never materialized. $5,000 for a specialization course Ethan needed to take, $8,000 for car repairs after a supposed accident, $12,000 to help with the down payment on a new car for Chloe because her old one wasn't safe enough. In less than a year, nearly $60,000 had left my account. I, who had spent 4 decades saving every penny, watched my reserves dwindle without a single cent returning. Still, I couldn't say no. He was my son, my only child. How could I deny him help when he said he needed it? Then one afternoon in May, I received a call that would change everything. "Mrs. Eleanor Vance?" a female voice asked on the other end of the line. "Yes, this is she. This is Meridian Bank. We're calling to verify an unusual transaction on your credit card. Did you authorize a purchase of $8,500 at Tiffany's?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't made such a purchase. I hadn't even been inside a jewelry store in years. "No," I replied, my voice trembling. "I did not authorize that purchase. In that case, we'll block the transaction and your card. You'll need to visit a branch to request a new one." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. There was only one possible explanation. Someone had used my card without my permission, and that someone could only be Ethan or Chloe. My own card, which I had lent Ethan 2 weeks prior for a work emergency. A dinner with important clients that he needed to pay for, but his own card was maxed out. It was a Wednesday, and I had to wait until Sunday to confront them in person. Those were the longest days of my life since David's passing. The feeling of betrayal was physical, a constant weight in my chest, an ache that wouldn't subside. I couldn't sleep properly. I lost my appetite, and my violets went without water for the first time in years. Sunday arrived, and with it, Ethan and Chloe for the traditional lunch. She was wearing a new necklace, white gold with small, sparkling diamonds. I immediately recognized the style from Tiffany Co., where David had bought my wedding ring decades ago. I placed the credit card statement on the table before even serving lunch. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. Ethan blinked, confused. Chloe immediately touched her necklace, an automatic, telling gesture. About what, Mom? About an $8,500 purchase at Tiffany's that I didn't make. The silence that followed was more damning than any confession. Chloe was the first to break it, her voice artificially smooth. Eleanor, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Ethan wanted to surprise you for your birthday. The necklace was meant to be a gift. My birthday was in October. It was May. With my own money? I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. Ethan finally spoke, running a hand through his hair, a gesture he'd made since childhood when caught in a lie. Mom, we were going to pay it back. It's just, this opportunity came up, this exclusive necklace, and I thought you'd look beautiful in it. I thought you'd be happy. I looked at the necklace on Chloe's neck, her perfectly manicured nails, the designer handbag resting on the sofa. Then I looked at my son, at this stranger wearing Ethan's face. Then why is the necklace on her neck? Ethan swallowed hard, searching for words. Chloe intervened again, now with a less conciliatory tone. I was just trying it on to see how it looked. Our sizes are almost the same. The lie was so transparent, I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I felt something harden inside me, a resolve I didn't know I still possessed. I want my card back. Now. Mom, let's just talk calmly, Ethan tried, reaching a hand across the table. We're family. Families help each other. The card, I repeated, holding out my hand. Chloe opened her designer bag and pulled out my card, placing it on the table with a sharp movement. I never thought you'd be so petty, she said, the words dripping like poison. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me, I repeated, incredulous. What exactly have you done for me besides spend my money? We spend time with you, Chloe exclaimed, as if it were some extraordinary generosity. We come here every Sunday when we could be traveling, going out with friends, living our lives. Ethan, who until then had seemed uncomfortable with the conversation's direction, suddenly adopted a defensive posture. Mom, you're being unfair. We've always been attentive. We've always taken care of you. Taken care of me? By using my card without my permission? It was a slip-up, he insisted. A momentary mistake. We were going to pay it back. Like you paid back the $10,000 for the kitchen remodel that turned into a trip to Aspen, or the $12,000 for the car Chloe urgently needed, or the $8,000 for the supposed accident. From Ethan's expression, I realized he never expected me to have noticed the lies. Perhaps he thought I was too naive, too distracted, or simply too desperate for his presence in my life to question his stories. Have you been tracking our expenses? Chloe asked, outraged. That's an invasion of privacy. It's my money, I responded calmly. It's not an invasion to check where my own money is going. Ethan stood up abruptly, dragging his chair across the wooden floor. I think it's best we leave. You're clearly not in a state to have a rational conversation. That phrase, not in a state to have a rational conversation, set off an alarm in my mind. It was exactly the kind of language used to invalidate older people, to suggest they're no longer in full control of their faculties. I am perfectly rational, Ethan. Rational enough to know that you've repeatedly lied to me to get money. You're being paranoid, Chloe declared, grabbing her bag. Ethan, I told you this would happen. Your mother is getting senile. Senile. The word hung in the room like a veiled threat. Let's go, honey, Ethan said, taking Chloe's arm. At the door, he turned back. When you've calmed down, we can talk. We love you, Mom, but we can't accept these kinds of accusations. The door closed, and I was left alone with my tumultuous thoughts and the terrible suspicion that this was only the beginning of something much worse. In the following days, I heard nothing from them. The next Sunday came and went without the traditional lunch. I called Ethan on Monday, but the call went to voicemail. I sent messages that were read but not answered. Their silence was more unsettling than any confrontation. I decided to take steps to protect what was left of my savings. I went to the bank and requested detailed statements for the last 18 months. The manager, a middle-aged man who had known me for years, frowned as he checked my account. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "are you aware there are 3 additional cards linked to your account?" My stomach clenched. 3 cards? I only ever requested one. "Well, according to our system, you authorized the issuance of additional cards for an Ethan Vance and a Chloe Vance. There's also a 3rd card in the name of, let me check, a Jessica Morgan." Jessica Morgan. I didn't know anyone by that name. "I never authorized those cards," I said, my voice shaking. "Never." The manager's expression turned serious. "In that case, Mrs. Vance, we need to file a fraud report." I left the bank, feeling both deceived and determined. Before filing the report, I decided to confront Ethan one last time. I went to their apartment unannounced. It was mid-afternoon on a Tuesday, and I didn't expect to find them home, but I needed to see the place with my own eyes, to understand how they were living while draining my savings. To my surprise, Chloe answered the door. She was wearing expensive athletic wear and looked like she had just come from a workout. Her face registered surprise at seeing me. "Eleanor? What are you doing here? We need to talk about the 3 additional credit cards linked to my account." She hesitated for a second, then opened the door wider. "Come in. Ethan isn't here, but we can talk." The apartment had been transformed since my last visit. New furniture, a massive television on the wall, pieces of art I'd never seen. The kitchen, which supposedly needed a remodel, now boasted state-of-the-art appliances and Italian marble countertops. "Do you like the remodel?" Chloe asked, noticing my gaze. There was a challenge in her voice, as if she were saying, "Yes, we spent your money on this." "So what?" "Who is Jessica Morgan?" I asked directly. Chloe sat on the white leather sofa, crossing her legs. "My cousin. She needed some temporary help, and since you've always been so generous, you opened a credit card in my name for your cousin?" "It was Ethan's suggestion," she replied promptly, shifting the blame. "He said you wouldn't mind since you always want to help family." Family, the word they used as a shield, as a justification for any predatory behavior. "I want all the cards, now." Chloe laughed, a cold sound I'd never heard from her before. "I don't have all of them here. Ethan takes his to work and Jessica has hers. Then give me yours. I'm under no obligation to do that," she answered defiantly. "Ethan is your son. The cards are in his name." "They are in my name," I corrected, "and the money is mine." She stood up, suddenly irritated. "You know what your problem is, Eleanor. You think money sitting in an account has any value. It doesn't. Money is meant to be used, to be enjoyed. What did you spend your whole life saving for? To die with a full bank account? We're living the life you never had the courage to live." Her words hit me like a slap, not because of the cruelty, but because of the crystal clear revelation of how she, and apparently Ethan, saw me. A foolish old woman whose only purpose was to finance the life they believed they deserved. "I'm going to report you all for fraud," I said, standing up. "All of you, do it," Chloe challenged, stepping so close I could smell her expensive perfume, probably also bought with my money. "Let's see if you have the guts to send your only son to jail, and even if you do, who do you think a judge will believe? A young, well-established couple, or a confused old woman who's changing her mind about the gifts she gave her family?" The threat was clear. It wasn't just my money at stake, but my credibility, my autonomy, my dignity. I left the apartment with trembling legs and a heavy heart, but with a newfound certainty. This was no longer about money. It was about my life, my independence, and I would fight with everything I had to protect them. The drive home that day was a blur. I barely remember how I got there, only the suffocating weight of betrayal and fear alternating in my chest. When I stepped into my apartment, everything felt foreign, as if it belonged to another life, another Eleanor. The violets on the balcony, the photos of Ethan as a child, David's favorite armchair. It all seemed like a cruel reminder of a family that no longer existed. I sat at the kitchen table and did something I had never done. I listed every single dollar that Ethan and Chloe had taken from me over the past 18 months. the unrepaid loans, the unauthorized purchases, the transfers for emergencies that were never explained. At the end, the number left me breathless. $94,000, more than a third of everything I had saved over 4 decades of work. That night, I couldn't sleep. Chloe's words echoed in my mind like a sentence. Who do you think a judge will believe? A young, well-established couple, or a confused old woman? And what if she was right? Was that how the world saw me now? A confused old woman whose words carried less weight than those of younger people? The next morning, I made a decision. I called my friend Margaret, who had retired with me from the high school where we taught. She had always been the more assertive of us, the one who wasn't afraid of confrontation. "Margaret," I said as soon as she answered, "I need your help. Do you know a trustworthy lawyer?" "A lawyer?" "Eleanor, what happened?" I told her everything, omitting no detail, the lies, the fraudulent cards, the veiled threat. "Eleanor." "My God," she murmured when I finished, "and you're still hesitating about whether to report them. He's my son, Margaret, my only son." "No, Eleanor," she replied firmly. "That man is no longer the boy you raised. I know someone who can help you. My nephew, Mr. Davies, is a lawyer specializing in elder rights. I'll give you his number." Margaret not only gave me the number, but insisted on accompanying me to Mr. Davies's office the next day. He was a man in his 40s with kind eyes behind discreet-rimmed glasses and a calm way of speaking that immediately inspired my confidence. "Mrs. Vance," he said after listening to my story, "what you're describing is a classic case of elder financial abuse. Unfortunately, it's far more common than people imagine, especially when the perpetrators are family members." "What can we do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have several options. First, we need to immediately block all cards linked to your account and check if there are any other accounts or loans in your name that you're unaware of. Second, we can file a civil lawsuit to recover the funds. Third, there is the possibility of criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement." Criminal? The word sounded heavy, final. That would mean... It would mean my son and his wife could face jail time. "Yes," Mr. Davies confirmed gently, "but that decision is entirely up to you. Some people prefer to simply recover the money and cut ties without involving the criminal system." I thought of Ethan as a child, learning to walk, holding onto my fingers with his chubby little hands. I thought of him as a teenager, proudly showing me his first report card with exemplary grades. I thought of the young man who cried when he received his university diploma, dedicating the achievement to me and his father's memory. Then I thought of the man who allowed strangers to open credit cards in my name, who used the memory of our family ties to manipulate me, who was willing to paint me as senile to maintain access to my money. I just want my money back, I decided, and I want them out of my life. Mr. Davies nodded, understanding. "We'll focus on recovering the funds then, but you must be prepared. They won't make it easy. People who commit this kind of abuse rarely admit what they've done. They'll likely try to turn this back on you in some way." "How so?" "It's a common tactic. When confronted, financial abusers often claim the victim is confused, that they gave permission and forgot, or even that they're being manipulated by a third party. In extreme cases, I've seen perpetrators try to obtain legal guardianship over the victim's finances, alleging mental incapacity. A shiver ran down my spine. It was exactly what Chloe had hinted at. And can they succeed? Not easily. Not without substantial evidence of incapacity. And from what I can see, you are in full control of your faculties. But it's important that we are prepared for all possibilities. In the following days, I entered a strange state of permanent alert. Mr. Davies helped me block all the cards and accounts, check my name with credit agencies, and prepare the documentation for the lawsuit. Margaret practically moved into my apartment, refusing to leave me alone, especially after we received word that Ethan had tried to make withdrawals from my savings account, now protected by new passwords. The first retaliation came a week later in the form of a call from a psychologist who claimed to have been hired by my son, concerned about my recent episodes of confusion and paranoia. The man spoke with a practiced condescension, as if he were talking to a child. "Mrs. Vance, your son is very worried. He informed me that you've been making baseless accusations, that you're distrustful of those close to you, that you believe your money is being stolen. These are classic symptoms of early-stage dementia." I hung up without responding. 10 minutes later, Mr. Davies called me. "Mrs. Vance, I just received a call from a lawyer representing your son. They're indicating they will file a petition for a conservatorship." Conservatorship. The word landed like a death sentence. They were actually willing to have me declared legally incompetent to maintain access to my money. "What do we do now?" I asked, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "Now we act preemptively. I will request independent medical and neuropsychological evaluations to certify your full competency. We will carefully document all their intimidation attempts and expedite our lawsuit against them." In the following weeks, I underwent a battery of tests. Neurologists, psychologists, geriatricians, all certified that I was in perfect control of my faculties, with no signs of cognitive decline that would justify any kind of legal intervention. Each certificate, each report, was a small victory, a confirmation of what I already knew. There was nothing wrong with me, other than the naive trust I had placed in my own son. Meanwhile, the attacks continued. Neighbors informed me that Ethan and Chloe had been canvassing the building, talking to residents about my worrying mental state. One of the retired teachers who had worked with me received a call from them, asking her to testify about changes in my behavior. The principal of the school where I had taught for 40 years called me, concerned. "Eleanor, your son was here asking if you had already shown signs of confusion before you retired. He said he's worried about your mental health. What's going on?" I had to explain everything, feeling the bitter taste of humiliation with every word. The principal, outraged, assured me that no one from the school would cooperate with what she called a blatant attempt at character assassination. The petition for conservatorship was formally filed 3 weeks later. I received the official notice on a sunny Thursday in August, delivered by an embarrassed court officer. The document, cold and bureaucratic, alleged that I showed clear signs of cognitive decline, erratic behavior, pathological distrust, and an inability to properly manage my financial resources. The petition cited as evidence my unfounded accusations against my son and daughter-in-law, my recent obsession with money and third-party accounts of changes in my behavior. The most shocking part was the name listed as the primary petitioner. Ethan Vance, my son, the boy I had raised alone, to whom I had dedicated every drop of my sweat, every extra minute of work, every sacrifice of my life. Mr. Davies reacted with professional efficiency, but I could see the outrage in his eyes when he came to my apartment that same evening to discuss our strategy. "Mrs. Vance, do not worry. This petition is baseless. We have all the medical reports certifying your full mental capacity. What they are trying to do is extremely serious and unethical. In fact, it can backfire on them." "How so?" "We are building a strong body of evidence that this conservatorship petition is, in fact, a deliberate attempt to gain control over your resources after you cut off their access. This constitutes bad faith litigation and can result in legal consequences for your son and his wife." Still, fear settled in me like a parasite. What if the judge believed them? What if I lost not just my money but my autonomy? I, who had managed a household alone for decades, who had raised a son, who had managed classrooms of 40 students for years, to be declared incapable of taking care of myself. The days leading up to the hearing were a whirlwind. Margaret practically moved into my apartment, refusing to leave me alone. Other retired colleagues formed a sort of protective network around me, taking turns with visits, phone calls, and accompanying me on necessary outings. It was as if a silent community of older women had recognized in my situation something familiar, something that could happen to any of them. One afternoon, as we awaited the hearing, I received a visit from a former student who now worked at the same bank where I had my account. Sarah had been a shy girl who blossomed in my math classes, discovering a talent that led her to study accounting. She was now a branch manager in the city center. "Mrs. Vance," she said, sitting in my living room, "I came because I heard about what's happening, and I thought this might help." She placed a folder on the table. "Here are copies of all the transactions made with your cards over the past 2 years, including the location, date, time, and in some cases, even security camera footage from the establishments." I leafed through the documents, feeling a mix of gratitude and horror. It was all there. The cash withdrawals made at 3 in the morning from ATMs across town, simultaneous purchases in different stores, proving that more than one person was using my cards. Transactions at expensive restaurants on days when I was verifiably at home, attested by call logs from my landline. "Sarah, how did you get this?" Let's just say I have friends in various departments at the bank, and all of them remember the teacher who never gave up on them, even when they were failing math. She smiled. "What your son is trying to do is wrong, Mrs. Vance. We're not going to let it happen." The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in September. I put on my best clothes, a navy blue suit I wore for special occasions, and let Margaret do my hair. I wanted to look exactly like who I was, a perfectly capable, dignified, and self-sufficient 72-year-old woman. The courtroom was filled with people I didn't expect to see. Former colleagues from school, old neighbors, even some ex-students who had grown up and become adults themselves. They all came to support me, to testify to my lucidity, to form a human wall against the attempt to strip me of my autonomy. When Ethan entered, accompanied by Chloe and their lawyer, the look of surprise on his face at seeing the packed room was priceless. For a moment, our eyes met, and I thought I saw a flicker of shame in his face before he looked away. Chloe, on the other hand, held her chin high, defiant, as if absolutely convinced of her position. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a neutral expression, reviewed the documents submitted by both parties before speaking. "We are here to evaluate the petition for a partial conservatorship of Eleanor Vance, age 72, filed by her son, Ethan Vance, who alleges the respondent's progressive inability to manage her assets and financial resources." She then addressed me directly. "Mrs. Vance, do you understand the purpose of this hearing?" "Perfectly, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "My son is trying to have me declared incompetent to manage my own money because I blocked his access to my account after discovering that he and his wife had been using my cards without my authorization." The judge nodded and turned to Ethan. "Mr. Vance, what prompted you to file for your mother's conservatorship?" Ethan glanced quickly at his lawyer before answering, his voice trained to sound concerned. "Your Honor, my mother has shown worrying behaviors in recent months. Confusion, paranoia, baseless accusations against family members. She believes we are stealing her money, when in reality we have always used the resources with her full knowledge and permission." "And did you authorize your son and daughter-in-law to use your credit cards?" the judge asked me. "I authorized specific loans with defined amounts and purposes, which were never repaid. I never authorized unrestricted use of my cards, let alone the opening of additional cards in my name." It was then that Mr. Davies presented the folder with the documents provided by Sarah. The judge examined the evidence carefully. The detailed statements, the simultaneous purchases in different locations, the late-night withdrawals, the transactions made while I was verifiably elsewhere. "Mr. Vance," she said finally, "how do you explain these simultaneous transactions in different places? Or these withdrawals made at 3 in the morning from ATMs across town, when your mother was verifiably at home?" Ethan turned pale. His lawyer tried to intervene, arguing that the documents had not been obtained through the proper channels, but the judge cut him off. The issue here is not the admissibility of this evidence in a criminal proceeding, but whether there is any basis to declare Mrs. Vance incompetent. And what I am seeing strongly suggests that not only is she perfectly lucid, but she has been the victim of financial abuse. The hearing continued with testimonies from doctors and specialists who had evaluated me, all certifying my full capacity. Former colleagues and even old students testified to my lucidity, my competence as a teacher, my management skills. The decisive moment came when the judge asked me to demonstrate my knowledge of my own financial situation. Mrs. Vance, could you detail your current financial situation for me, your resources, monthly expenses, plans for the future? I responded with precision, listing the exact amount of my pension, my savings before and after the unauthorized withdrawals, my monthly expenses for food, health, apartment maintenance, taxes. I explained how I had planned my finances to ensure independence in my old age, how I had created an emergency fund for unforeseen medical expenses, how I managed my resources to live comfortably within my means. As I spoke, I noticed the judge's expression soften. It wasn't pity, it was respect. At the end of my testimony, she nodded slightly. Mrs. Vance, the court is convinced of your full capacity to manage your life and your finances. The petition for conservatorship is denied. She then turned to Ethan, her expression now severe. Mr. Vance, I find this petition not only baseless but potentially malicious. There is substantial evidence to suggest that you and your wife may have committed financial fraud against your mother. I strongly recommend that you seek a resolution for the matter of the misappropriated funds, as the court will be forwarding this evidence to the district attorney's office to evaluate the appropriateness of criminal action. When we left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had won. My autonomy was preserved, but at a devastating cost. The relationship with my son, which I had nurtured for 40 years, was irreparably destroyed. I looked at him one last time before leaving the courthouse, searching for some trace of the boy I once held in my arms, but I only found the hard stare of a stranger. Court victories rarely bring the satisfaction you imagine. As friends and supporters congratulated me on the courthouse steps, all I felt was a growing void where the certainty of unconditional love once existed. The judge had confirmed my sanity, my capability, my rights, but nothing could restore the shattered trust or erase the image of my son trying to declare me incompetent to get his hands on my money. In the following days, I tried to return to normal. I watered my violets. I graded papers for the tutoring I still did for a few students on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I attended the book club meetings at the local library, everyday activities that once brought me pleasure, but which I now performed mechanically, like someone following a script to pretend life goes on. Margaret remained by my side like a tireless sentinel, showing up with homemade cakes, suggesting walks, filling the silence with conversations about anything and everything except Ethan. Other friends took turns visiting, as if they feared that if they left me alone, I might crumble under the weight of the betrayal. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the hearing, as I was grading papers at the kitchen table, the doorbell rang. It was Renata, my neighbor from 302, a reserved woman who rarely joined in elevator conversations. "Mrs. Vance," she said, nervously twisting the handles of her purse. "Can I come in? I need to tell you something." I invited her to sit. I offered her coffee, which she refused with an impatient wave. "I came because I should have done this sooner. Maybe it could have prevented everything you went through." "What are you talking about, Renata?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Your son and daughter-in-law approached me about a month ago. They wanted me to testify at the hearing, to say that I had seen you talking to yourself, seeming confused, leaving the house in inappropriate clothing." A lump formed in my throat. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them it was a lie, that I had never seen anything of the sort, that you have always been perfectly lucid, organized, and independent." She looked down. Then they offered me money, $5,000 to make up stories about your behavior. My hands began to tremble slightly. Did you take it? No, she seemed genuinely offended. Of course not. I told them I wouldn't lie to harm someone for $50,000, especially not a neighbor who has always been kind to me. But she hesitated. They approached other residents in the building, and some people accepted. Who? I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. The doorman, for one. He's new to the building, doesn't know you well. The couple from 107, too. They barely speak to anyone. I doubt they even know who you are. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to process this new layer of treachery. Ethan had not only tried to declare me incompetent, he had tried to buy witnesses to strengthen his case. Why are you telling me this now, Renata? Because I can't stop thinking that if I had reported it sooner, maybe I could have prevented all of this. And because I think you deserve to know the extent of what they tried to do. After she left, I remained seated at the table, the forgotten papers in front of me. I thought of all the times I had made Ethan's favorite meal, of how I had saved to give him the best possible education, of how I had celebrated each of his achievements as if they were my own. And I thought about how, in the end, none of it mattered when he saw an opportunity to get his hands on my money. I called Mr. Davies and told him what Renata had shared. He took notes, promised to investigate, and mentioned the possibility of aggravating the charges against Ethan and Chloe. Technical words, legal procedures. It all sounded distant, unable to touch the real wound. "What do you really want, Mrs. Vance?" he finally asked me, his voice softening. "Do you want to take this to the fullest legal extent? Do you just want your money back? Or do you want to try for some kind of reconciliation?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Their punishment? My money back? Or simply my son, not the man he had become, but the boy he had been? "I want it to be over," I finally replied. "I want to be able to move forward without constantly looking over my shoulder, fearing the next attack. I want my money back, but more than that, I want peace." Mr. Davies nodded, understanding. "We'll propose a settlement then. They return everything they took improperly. They sign a document committing to never again attempt to access your finances, and in return, we won't pursue the criminal charges." Will they accept? Probably. The alternative would be facing a criminal trial with substantial evidence against them. Even an inexperienced lawyer would advise them to take the deal. The settlement was proposed, and as Mr. Davies had predicted, it was quickly accepted. Ethan and Chloe committed to returning the $94,000 in monthly installments over 3 years, with interest. They signed legal documents renouncing any claim to my finances and agreed to maintain their distance, with no direct contact unless I initiated it. Within a few months, my financial life began to stabilize. The installments arrived punctually, although I suspected this was more due to fear of legal consequences than any sense of responsibility. My apartment had been fitted with new locks and a security system, courtesy of former students who now worked at a tech company. My bank accounts were protected by new security protocols that Sarah had helped me implement. Externally, everything seemed resolved, organized, controlled. But internally, I was grappling with a deep and confusing grief. The grief for someone who was still alive but had died to me in every way that mattered. On lonely nights, I would rummage through old photo boxes, tracing the outline of a young Ethan's face with my fingers, trying to understand at what point I had lost that boy. Had it been my fault? Was I too lenient or too strict? Had I unconsciously sent some message that money was more important than principles? One afternoon, as I was watering my violets on the balcony, I noticed that one of them, the oldest one, a gift from David, was dying. The leaves, once vibrant, were withered and yellowed. I examined the soil, checking if it was too dry or too wet. I looked for signs of pests. I moved the pot to a different spot to get more light. But something told me it was too late. The plant had spent too much time in poor conditions and was now beyond the point of recovery. Watching that dying violet, I felt a strange sense of identification. I, too, had spent too much time in a toxic situation, allowing my vital energy, my resources, my trust to be drained. The difference was that somehow I had found the strength to pull away before it was too late. The plant didn't have that choice. I realize in recounting this story that I speak of Ethan and Chloe as if they were villains from a simple tale, but life is rarely so clear-cut. There were moments, in the quietest hours of the early morning, when I wondered if Chloe had manipulated Ethan as skillfully as they had tried to manipulate me. If my son, somewhere inside that stranger who had tried to rob me, was still the boy I had raised to be honest and good. But those reflections led nowhere but to more pain. I learned, little by little, not to dig too deep into the memories, not to question every step of how we got to that point. The past was a labyrinth where it was easy to get lost. I needed to keep my eyes on the path ahead. It was Margaret who finally pulled me out of the state of lethargy I had settled into. One Saturday afternoon, she appeared at my door with a determined expression I knew well. "Eleanor, get dressed. We're going out." "Out? Where?" "To the university. There's a lecture on contemporary American literature starting in an hour. Then we're having dinner at that Italian restaurant on Providence Road that you love so much." "Margaret, I'm not in the mood for—" "That's exactly why we're going," she interrupted, already opening my closet and picking out clothes. "You've been cooped up in this apartment for too long, ruminating on what happened. Life goes on, Eleanor, and continuing to live is the best revenge you can have against those who tried to diminish you." Reluctantly, I let her drag me out. The lecture, given by an enthusiastic young professor, was surprisingly captivating. The dinner afterward, with glasses of wine and conversation that had nothing to do with Ethan, Chloe, or lawsuits, was like breathing fresh air after months in a closed room. Upon returning home, I noticed something I hadn't perceived in my absence. My apartment smelled musty, of curtains that hadn't been opened frequently, of a suspended life. I decided right then and there that I would not let Ethan's betrayal define the rest of my life. The next morning, I opened all the windows, letting the October light stream in without restriction. I sorted clothes I no longer wore for donation. I reorganized books. I cleaned surfaces I had neglected. Small gestures of care for my space that were, in reality, gestures of care for myself. And it was during this cleaning that I found at the back of a drawer a card David had given me on our last wedding anniversary, just 3 months before he died. Inside, in his angular handwriting, he had written, "To Eleanor, who always finds light even on the darkest days. Your heart is stronger than you know." The words, written 2 decades earlier, felt present, urgent, as if David had somehow foreseen that I would need them at this exact moment. I cried then, not the contained weeping that had accompanied me in recent months, but deep sobs that seemed to come from the core of my being. I cried for David, for Ethan, for myself, for all that I had lost, and for what I still needed to find. When the tears finally dried, I felt something I didn't expect: lightness. As if the crying had washed away not only the pain of the recent betrayal, but also layers of accumulated sadness I didn't even know I was carrying. That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly without the nightmares that had become constant companions. The next day, I woke up with a clarity I had forgotten was possible. It was time to start over, not just to survive what had happened, but to truly live again. I was 72 years old, in reasonable health, with a sharp mind, loyal friends, and financial resources that, though reduced, would still allow me to live comfortably. I had more than many people would ever have, and it would be a form of ingratitude not to take advantage of these gifts. I started with small changes. I enrolled in a digital photography course at the university's program for seniors, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. I rejoined the local church choir, which I had left after David's death because singing without him felt wrong. I accepted Sarah's invitation to give occasional talks on financial literacy at her bank, an irony that was not lost on me considering my recent experience. Each new activity, each new relationship, was a small affirmation that my story was not over, that there were still chapters to be written that did not include Ethan or the pain he had caused. Time is a strange healer. It doesn't completely mend all wounds, as the cliches say, but it transforms them into something you can live with. The sharp pain of Ethan's betrayal gradually morphed into a chronic sadness, always present, but no longer paralyzing. A part of me still jumped when the phone rang, fearing it was him with some new demand or threat. Another part secretly hoped he would call to apologize, to say he understood the gravity of what he had done. Neither of those calls came. The settlement installments continued to arrive punctually in my account, cold, impersonal bank transfers that were the only remaining trace that we once had a relationship. I sometimes wondered how Ethan explained those monthly payments to himself. Were they, in his distorted mind, a form of extortion he was a victim of? Or were there moments of clarity when he recognized the harm he had caused? These unanswered questions lost their importance as my life filled with new experiences. The photography course turned out to be an unexpected passion. I discovered I had an eye for composition, for capturing moments others didn't notice. I began to document my neighborhood, the faces of local merchants, the subtle changes of the seasons as seen through the same windows, day after day. The financial literacy talks at Sarah's bank evolved into a more structured program. Finances for Seniors, we called it. I shared basic principles of budgeting, retirement planning, but I also warned about the signs of family financial abuse, using my own experience without names as a case study. When someone you love starts talking about our money when referring to your money, pay attention, I would tell the participants, mostly women in their 60s and 70s. When loans are requested for emergencies that are never fully explained, when promises of repayment are made and repeatedly broken, when you start to feel guilty for questioning where your money is going, these are red flags you can't ignore. The looks of recognition on many faces told me my story was not unique. The shame and silence surrounding elder financial abuse, especially when perpetrated by family, create the illusion of isolated cases, when, in reality, it's a silent epidemic. It was after one of these talks, almost a year after the court hearing, that I met Arthur. He was a 74-year-old gentleman, a widower for 5 years, who had attended my presentation with particular attention. When the Q&A session ended, he waited for everyone to disperse before approaching me. "Your lecture moved me deeply," he said, extending his hand. "Arthur Mendoza." "Eleanor Vance," I replied, noticing his kind brown eyes and the calm way he spoke. "I'm glad it was helpful. More than helpful. Revealing." He hesitated for a moment. "I went through something very similar with my youngest son. It didn't get to the point of a lawsuit, but it almost did." There was an understanding in his eyes that disarmed me. The shared knowledge of a specific pain that few could fully comprehend. "It's hard to talk about," I observed. "The shame. The shame is what keeps us isolated," he completed. "And the isolation is what allows the abuse to continue." I accepted his invitation for coffee. We talked for hours, not just about our painful experiences with our children, but about books, music, places we had visited, dreams we still had. Arthur had been a history professor. He was passionate about jazz, made the best mushroom risotto in Charlotte, according to himself, and had an elderly dog named Kafka. "After the writer?" I asked. Actually, because as a puppy, he would stare at walls as if seeing something incomprehensible and slightly threatening, he replied with a laugh. It seemed fitting. At the end of that afternoon, we exchanged phone numbers with the vague promise of keeping in touch. I didn't think much of it afterward. Casual encounters happen and rarely lead to anything significant, especially at our age. To my surprise, Arthur called the next day, inviting me to a jazz concert at a local club that weekend. I accepted, more out of curiosity than anything else. I hadn't been on a date in nearly 30 years, since a few months after David's death, when well-meaning friends tried to reintroduce me to the market. An experience I had found disastrous and had no desire to repeat. But Arthur was different from the men I had met back then. There was no desperation in him, no hurry, no sense that I should feel grateful for the attention. Just the quiet companionship of someone who understood the value of time, who knew how to appreciate small moments, who didn't see widowhood as a problem to be solved, but as part of the story that had brought us here. The concert was followed by dinner, which led to more concerts, art exhibitions, walks in the park, and long conversations in coffee shops. In Arthur, I found something I hadn't expected. A companion who didn't fill the space David had left, but created an entirely new space, where I could be not just David's widow or Ethan's mother, but simply Eleanor, a woman with her own thoughts, desires, fears, and hopes. 6 months after our first meeting, Arthur invited me to meet Kafka, his dog. He was a very old mutt, with gray fur around his muzzle and a philosophical disposition that justified his name. We spent the afternoon in his cozy apartment, filled with books and vinyl records, while he prepared the famous mushroom risotto. "Do you know what I admire most about you, Eleanor?" he asked as he slowly stirred the rice. "Your resilience. You went through something that would have shattered many people, but instead of closing yourself off, you transformed the experience into something that helps others." It wasn't always like that, I admitted, looking at the glass of wine he had poured for me. In the first few months, I could barely get out of bed. There were days I wondered if it was worth continuing. Not in a dramatic way, you understand, just that feeling of, what for? For whom? Why? Arthur nodded sympathetically. I know that feeling well. When Teresa died, I spent 6 months basically on autopilot. It was Kafka who saved me, really. An old dog who needed regular walks, feeding at specific times. He gave me a purpose when I couldn't find one within myself. As I watched Arthur cook with precise, calm movements, I realized how unexpected this new phase of my life was. At 71, after a devastating betrayal that should have made me bitter and distrustful, I was sitting in the kitchen of a man I had known for less than a year, feeling something that strangely resembled happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Arthur asked, noticing my silence. "I'm thinking about how unpredictable life is, how we can lose everything we considered certain and yet somehow find new beginnings where we least expect them." He smiled, that kind smile that had become familiar over the past months. New beginnings. I like that. I think that's what we're doing, aren't we? Starting something new. Our relationship evolved with the caution of two people who knew both the value of love and the cost of loss. There was none of the urgency of youth or the traditional expectations of where a relationship should go. We were two whole individuals who chose to share parts of our lives without the pretense of filling each other's empty spaces. Arthur introduced me to his small circle of friends, other retired professors, an amateur jazz group he played with occasionally, his younger sister and her husband. I introduced him to Margaret, to Sarah, to my choir colleagues. Our lives began to intertwine in small, daily gestures. Borrowed books, shared recipes, good morning texts, late-night calls just to say goodnight. "Do you think it's possible to love again after 70? I asked him one night as we walked through the park after an outdoor concert. Not in the same way as before, of course, but in some way? Arthur stopped, looking at me with an intensity that made me blush like a teenager. "I don't think it's possible to love the same way twice at any age," he replied. "Every love is unique because the people involved are unique, and the moment it happens is unique. But yes, I believe we can love deeply at any age, perhaps even more deeply after 70, because we carry an understanding of the preciousness of time that young people simply can't have." He took my hand, a gesture that had become common between us, but which at that moment seemed charged with new meaning. I'm in love with you, Eleanor. I'm not afraid to say it, and I have no expectations about what this means or where it should lead us. I just want you to know. The words hung in the night air, crystalline and undeniable. A part of me wanted to retreat to protect myself, the same part that still bled from Ethan's betrayal. But another part, a part I thought had died long ago, responded with a certainty that surprised me. I'm in love with you too, Arthur, I replied, the words coming more easily than I expected. And that scares me a little. What scares you? Trusting again, believing that something good can last. After what happened with Ethan. I am not your son, he said gently, and you are not my daughter. We are adults who have lived full lives with mistakes and successes, losses and gains. We come to this point carrying our scars, but also our wisdom. We don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. He was right, of course. The fear I felt wasn't really about Arthur, but about my own judgment. I had trusted Ethan completely. I had believed I knew him better than anyone in the world, and yet he had betrayed me in the most painful way possible. How could I trust myself to correctly assess someone else's character? But I realized, looking at Arthur under the soft light of the park lamps, that the risk of trusting again was less than the guaranteed cost of never doing so, never allowing myself to feel. Living locked in a fortress of distrust wasn't really living. I don't know what the future holds for us, I said finally, but I'm willing to find out, one day at a time. Arthur smiled, and in that moment, he looked younger than his 74 years. He leaned in and kissed me. Our first kiss, gentle and full of promise, like the first chapter of a book we were both eager to keep reading. Our relationship flourished in the following months, developing its own rhythm and routines. We alternated weekends between his apartment and mine. We discovered favorite restaurants, old movies we both enjoyed, composers we listened to repeatedly. We had our first small disagreements about politics, about the best way to make coffee, about whether it was worth getting up early to watch the sunrise. I thought it was. He preferred to sleep. We learned to accept our differences without trying to change each other. In many ways, it was a more mature and balanced relationship than any I had ever experienced, even with David, who'd been a good husband but a product of a generation where gender roles were more rigid. With Arthur, there was a genuine partnership, a constant give and take, a deep respect for each other's individuality. A year after our first meeting, Arthur surprised me with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking," he said as we had dinner at his apartment, with Kafka sleeping peacefully at our feet. "We both live alone. We both have apartments bigger than we need. It makes economic, ecological, and emotional sense for us to consider living together." The suggestion caught me off guard. Living together at 72? It seemed like a youthful, almost impulsive decision, and yet it made perfect practical sense. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" I asked, wanting to make sure we were on the same page. "Yes," he confirmed. "It doesn't have to be permanent if you're not comfortable. We can do a 3-month trial. If it doesn't work, we each go back to our own apartments. No hard feelings. Where would we live? Your place or mine?" "Neither, actually." He looked a little nervous. "I was thinking we could look for a new place, something that's ours, not mine or yours. A new start." The idea was both terrifying and liberating, to leave the apartment where I had lived with David, where I had raised Ethan, where every room held memories, some sweet, others painful, to start in a new space with no ghosts, no pre-existing stories. "I think I'd like that," I finally replied. "A new start in a new place. But I have one condition." "What's that?" "My violets come with me. All of them." Arthur laughed, relieved. "Your violets, my vinyl records, and Kafka. The essentials." In the following weeks, we visited several apartments looking for the right place. We wanted something on the ground floor or with a reliable elevator, considering our ages. We needed space for my plants, for Arthur's books, for a small piano he had inherited from his mother. We wanted a quiet but not isolated neighborhood with essential services nearby. We finally found it. A 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of the city with a sunny balcony perfect for my violets, a spacious living room where Arthur's piano would fit comfortably, and a park nearby where Kafka could walk. The neighborhood had everything we needed within walking distance: a pharmacy, a supermarket, a bakery, even a small cultural center with activities for seniors. We began to plan the move, deciding what to take, what to donate, what to leave behind. It was an exercise in detachment and, at the same time, redefinition. Every object we chose to keep held a meaning. Every item we decided to leave behind represented a release. It was during this organizational process that I found, at the back of a drawer, the last gift I had given Ethan before everything fell apart. A watch that had belonged to David, which I had had restored for my son's 40th birthday. I held the watch in my hands, feeling its weight, hearing the steady tick-tock that marked the passage of time. Time that doesn't come back, that moves forward regardless of our losses and gains. "What are you going to do with that?" Arthur asked gently, noticing the object in my hands and the expression on my face. For a moment, I considered keeping it, a last material link to the son I had lost. But then I realized I didn't need the watch to remember Ethan, not the good times we had shared before everything went wrong. Those memories were inside me, not in objects. "I'm going to donate it," I decided. "Someone will be able to use it and appreciate it more than I can." Arthur nodded, understanding the significance of that small gesture. It wasn't just a watch I was leaving behind, but a part of the grief I had carried for too long. The move happened on a Tuesday in April, almost 2 years after the court hearing that had officially ended my relationship with Ethan. Friends came to help. Margaret supervising the movers with the efficiency of a general. Sarah organizing important documents. Former students carrying boxes of books and delicately transporting my violets. When the last truck was unloaded and the last helpers had said their goodbyes, Arthur and I were left alone in our new home, a space full of boxes and furniture in temporary positions, but already pulsating with possibilities. "Welcome to our new beginning," Arthur said, putting an arm around my shoulders as we looked at the messy living room. "Our new beginning," I repeated, savoring the words. Who would have thought that at 72, I'd be starting a new life? "Who said there's an age to start over?" he replied, kissing my forehead. "As long as there's a tomorrow, there's a chance for a new beginning." That night, we slept in our new bedroom, on a makeshift bed, exhausted from the move but strangely energized. Through the window, we could see a starry sky that seemed to promise better days. I fell asleep thinking about how life moves in unexpected cycles, how we can lose everything and still find new treasures, how we can be deeply hurt and still discover the capacity for life, how we can be betrayed by those we trust most and still learn to trust again. Ethan's betrayal had been the deepest wound of my life, but paradoxically, it had also been the catalyst that pushed me toward this new existence. An existence that, at 72, seemed richer in possibilities than I could have ever imagined. The seasons passed, and with them, our life together developed its own rhythms. The apartment, initially just a space with potential, truly became our home. The balcony turned into a small urban garden, with my violets blooming alongside aromatic herbs that Arthur grew for his culinary experiments. The living room, with the restored piano taking pride of place, became our sanctuary. He would play soft jazz pieces while I read or organized recent photographs. We established new traditions, long breakfasts on Sundays with classical music in the background, old movie nights at home on Fridays, a monthly dinner with close friends where everyone brought a dish and we shared stories late into the night. Our couple's routine developed naturally, without the frictions that often accompany younger couples. Maybe it was age, maybe the experience of past relationships, but there was a fluidity between us that surprised me, as if we had known each other for decades, not just a few years. I think the secret is that we're not trying to change each other, Arthur observed one evening as we washed dishes side by side. When we're young, we think loving someone means molding them into our ideal image. At our age, we understand that loving is accepting the other exactly as they are. I smiled, handing him a wet plate to dry. It also helps that we have nothing left to prove. We're not building careers, raising children, or trying to impress anyone. Except each other, occasionally. He winked, making me laugh. Our sex life, another aspect that many assume disappears with age, found its own expression. Less urgent than in youth, perhaps, but more present, more connected. There was a deep intimacy in knowing and being known by someone who understood the limitations and beauties of an older body, who didn't expect perfection, who found eroticism in shared vulnerability. Sex at 70 is like a good aged wine, Arthur once commented, lying beside me after we had made love. Less intense at first glance, perhaps, but with nuances and depths that only time can create. In this new phase, my relationship with money also changed. The settlement installments from Ethan continued to arrive punctually, and each monthly deposit was like a small reminder of the past. Initially, I checked the account obsessively, fearing the payments would stop, that Ethan would find some legal loophole to escape his obligations. But over time, that concern subsided. Arthur and I established a financial system that reflected our shared values. We kept separate accounts for personal expenses and previous savings, but we created a joint account for household expenses. We both contributed proportionally to our incomes, and all major decisions were discussed openly. It was a practical, respectful arrangement, without the power games that often involve money in relationships. It's funny, I commented to him one afternoon as we organized financial documents. I spent my life saving to secure my old age, and now that I'm here, I've discovered that true security doesn't just come from money, but from the connections we build. Although a good retirement plan certainly helps, Arthur added pragmatically, making me smile, the issue of Ethan remained an occasional shadow over our happiness. Arthur never pushed the subject, but he was always ready to listen when I felt the need to talk about my son, about the pain of the loss, about the confusion I still felt trying to reconcile the boy I had raised with the man who had betrayed me. I sometimes wonder if I should try to contact him, I confessed one night as we watched the rain from the window. Not to go back to how it was before. That would be impossible. But just to, find some closure maybe. Arthur considered my words carefully before responding. What would you hope to achieve with that? Forgiveness? Explanations? Reconciliation? The question made me reflect. What did I really want from Ethan after everything that had happened? I think I want to understand, I finally replied. I want to know how my son, whom I thought I had raised with values of honesty and respect, could do what he did. Was there something I didn't see? Something I could have done differently? Arthur took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, a gesture that had become as familiar as my own breathing. Eleanor, you know that some questions don't have satisfying answers, right? Sometimes people make terrible decisions for reasons even they don't fully understand. I know, I sighed. But still, it's hard not to wonder. I considered the possibility of writing a letter to Ethan, not accusatory, not demanding anything, just opening a channel for possible communication. I even drafted a few versions but never sent them. Something told me that the silence between us was, for now, necessary. Perhaps there were healings that only time could provide, distances that needed to be maintained before any approach was possible. Meanwhile, our life went on. Arthur continued to teach occasional classes as a guest professor and coordinate a study group on American history. I expanded my financial education program for seniors, now including specific workshops on protection against fraud and financial abuse. Together, we started planning small trips. First, weekend getaways to nearby historic towns. Then, more ambitious plans to see the Grand Canyon, a dream I had postponed for decades. We're not going to let age limit us, Arthur insisted as we studied maps and itineraries. We may go slower, need more breaks, but we can still explore, we can still be amazed. Our first big trip together was to the Southwest. Arthur, with his history background, turned every walk into a fascinating lesson on the expansion, the cultural influences, the social struggles that had shaped that region. I, with my newfound interest in photography, documented everything. The adobe architecture, the colorful markets, the stunning landscapes, the wrinkled faces of local artisans who told stories of the land. One particularly magical afternoon, sitting on a rock overlooking a vast canyon at sunset, Arthur took my hand and said something that would forever be etched in my memory. "Do you know what I love most about us, Eleanor? That we're not just surviving old age, we're thriving in it. We're creating a life that is rich and meaningful, not despite our age, but because of it." His words captured exactly what I felt. It wasn't a denial of old age, a desperate attempt to mimic youth, but a celebration of the privilege of aging, of reaching an age where wisdom replaces impetuousness, where appreciation replaces acquisition, where the quality of time matters more than its quantity. "I wish more people understood that," I replied, watching the horizon turn pink and orange. "That old age isn't a slippery slope to the end, but a mountain from which you can see farther and more clearly." Upon returning to Charlotte, we found an unexpected piece of mail waiting for me, a letter with the letterhead of the law firm that represented Ethan. My heart sped up as I opened the envelope, fearing some new legal complication. Instead, I found a brief note. "Dear Mrs. Eleanor Vance, we are writing to inform you that your son, Ethan Vance, has instructed us to transfer the remaining balance of the established settlement, thus fully liquidating the debt. The transfer has already been made to your bank account. Additionally, Mr. Vance has asked that we include the attached envelope of a personal nature. Sincerely, Mauricio Peixoto, Esquiu." Inside the larger envelope was a smaller one, with my name written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Mom, I'm paying off the rest of what I owe you, not because I have the money readily available. I don't, but because I need to close this chapter of my life. Chloe and I separated 6 months ago. She left me for someone with more resources. Ironic, isn't it? In the process, I discovered many lies she told, many manipulations I didn't realize at the time. That doesn't absolve me of my guilt for what we did to you. I was an adult. I made my own choices, and they were terrible. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to rebuild my life on a more solid foundation. I took out a loan to settle my debt with you because I no longer want this shadow over us. I heard you're living with someone. I hope you're happy. Ethan." It wasn't a request for reconciliation, not even a direct plea for forgiveness. It was something more complex, an acknowledgement, albeit partial, of the mistake, an attempt to close a painful story, perhaps a first tiny step towards some kind of healing. I showed the letter to Arthur, who read it carefully. "What do you think?" I asked, unsure how to feel. "It seems like the beginning of a reflection," he replied thoughtfully. "Not a complete reflection, not yet, but a start. At least he's taking some of the responsibility, even if he's still deflecting another part onto Chloe. Should I respond? That's something only you can decide, Eleanor. There's no right answer here." I spent days considering whether to reply. What would I say? How would I find the balance between honesty and compassion? Finally, I sat at the kitchen table and drafted a simple response. "Ethan, I received your letter and the final payment. I thank you for closing this financial matter between us. I'm sorry about your divorce. Regardless of the circumstances, I know separations are painful. Yes, I'm living with Arthur, a retired university professor. I've found a happiness I didn't expect at this stage of life. You're right to seek to rebuild your life on a more solid foundation. We all make mistakes, some more serious than others. The important thing is to learn from them. If one day you feel you're ready for an honest conversation, without resentment, my door will be open. No rush, no pressure. Eleanor. I deliberately signed it Eleanor, not Mom. Not because I had stopped being his mother, but because any rebuilding of our relationship would need to start from a new, more balanced place, where I was not just a resource to be exploited, but a whole person with boundaries and dignity. I sent the letter without great expectations. It was a seed planted in uncertain soil, which might germinate at some future point or remain dormant forever. Either way, I felt a lightness after dropping it in the mail, as if I had released something I was still holding inside me, some last invisible thread of hope or pain that needed to be cut for me to move forward completely. It's not closure, I explained to Arthur that night as we shared a glass of wine on the balcony. It's more like leaving a door ajar. He can choose to walk through it or not, but the decision is his now. Arthur nodded, understanding as always. And are you at peace with that? With whatever decision he makes? I reflected on the question, feeling the wine warm my throat and the night air cool my face. I'm at peace with myself, I finally replied, with my choices, with my path, and that's what matters in the end. He smiled, touching his glass to mine in a silent toast to the truth of those words. In the following months, I maintained occasional contact with Ethan, emails, a few phone calls. It wasn't the close relationship we had before, but it was no longer the painful abyss that had opened between us. It was something new, something under construction, with healthier foundations and more realistic expectations. Arthur, always attentive and generous, supported this gradual reconnection process without ever showing jealousy or resentment. When I mentioned this to him, admiring his emotional security, he responded with his characteristic quiet wisdom. Eleanor, at 77, I understand that the human heart is not a limited space where one love competes with another. It is an infinitely expandable territory. Your bond with Ethan, whatever form it ultimately takes, does not in any way diminish what we have. In fact, if it brings more peace to your heart, it will only enrich our life together. And he was right. As the old wound began to truly heal, I felt an expansion in my ability to be present, to fully appreciate the life we were building together. On our 4th anniversary of living together, Arthur surprised me with an unexpected gift. A small puppy, a mix of several breeds, rescued from a shelter. He's not a substitute for Kafka, he explained as the puppy explored our apartment with clumsy enthusiasm. But I thought our home could benefit from some new energy. Besides, caring for another living being keeps us engaged. With the future, we named the dog Chico, a name that seemed fitting for a being who had entered our lives bringing renewed joy. Chico, with his boundless energy and insatiable curiosity, forced us to maintain an active routine, to walk daily through the neighborhood, to interact with other pet owners in the local parks. He's keeping us young, Arthur often observed, as Chico enthusiastically pulled him along the sidewalk during our morning walks. As we approached 80, Arthur and I began to discuss the future of the financial literacy project. It was clear that our energy and ability to manage it daily were limited, but we wanted to ensure the work continued. We need to institutionalize the project, Arthur suggested. Transform it into something that doesn't just depend on us. With the help of Mr. Davies, who still assisted us with legal matters, we transformed the project into an officially registered nonprofit organization. We established a board of directors composed of younger professionals committed to the cause, including Sarah, my former student who now held a senior management position at her bank. In an emotional ceremony, I officially passed the presidency of the project to Sarah, keeping for myself and Arthur advisory positions on the board. This is not an end, but an evolution, I declared in my short speech during the ceremony. The work of protecting seniors from financial abuse is bigger than any individual. We are just passing the baton to capable hands to carry this vision forward. The transition was bittersweet. the inevitable acknowledgement of our physical limitations, but also the celebration of the legacy we were leaving, something that would continue to benefit others long after we were no longer here. One quiet afternoon, a few weeks after the ceremony, Arthur and I were sitting on our balcony with Chico asleep at our feet, watching the sunset paint the Charlotte sky with shades of orange and pink. My violets bloomed abundantly in the carefully arranged pots, including that special plant, the oldest one, which had so surprisingly recovered years ago. "What are you thinking about?" Arthur asked, noticing my contemplative silence. "I'm thinking about how unpredictable life is," I replied, an echo of a conversation we had years before. How, at 78, after losing my husband, being betrayed by my son, and almost losing everything I had built, I found a new kind of happiness I could never have imagined. Arthur took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, a gesture so familiar now it seemed a natural extension of myself. "You know what I learned from you, Eleanor? That resilience is not just about surviving life's storms, but about continuing to dance in the rain." I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder as we watched the last ray of sun disappear over the horizon. In my entire life as a teacher, I had never found a more perfect definition for what we had built together. Not just a stoic survival in the face of adversity, but a stubborn and deliberate celebration of life with all its complexities, pains, and unexpected beauties. Ethan's betrayal had been the deepest wound of my life, the moment when everything I believed about family and trust had been violently questioned. But paradoxically, it had also been the catalyst for this new existence. A life where I finally belonged completely to myself, where I had found a mature love based on mutual respect, where I had created something meaningful to help others facing similar situations. The city lights began to turn on around us, dotting the growing darkness with small, artificial constellations. Chico woke up, stretched languidly, and came to rest his head on my lap, asking for a pet. "I'm grateful," I said finally, the words simple but laden with meaning. "For what, specifically?" Arthur asked, his voice soft in the twilight. "For everything. For what was lost and for what was found. For the wounds that forced me to grow, and for the joys that came when I least expected them. For you, for us, for this life we built from the ashes of another life." Arthur gently kissed my forehead, his touch communicating more than words ever could. "And that life continues," he replied simply. "Tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. As long as we're here, we keep dancing." And so we did. Two old lovers dancing slowly on the balcony under the stars, with a curious dog circling our feet and Violet silently witnessing our impromptu celebration of life, a life that, against all odds, had blossomed again when all seemed lost. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on this next video that's appearing on your screen, because it has a twist you've never seen before. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your comments saying what you thought of my experience. Your opinion is very important to me.